Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We need 30 seconds for the reporters to take some pictures. However, I would like to welcome you very cordially here in Łódź in Freedom Games. Today, we will be talking about how local governments supported Ukraine in the context how the local governments cope in the face of the three latest crises: refugee, Ukraine, and pandemic-related crisis, as well as the energy crisis. My name is Jarosław Makowski. I am the head of the Civic Institute, which organizes the panel, and our guests include Emilia, a mayor. Good morning. Mayor of the city of Gdańsk, Aleksandra Dulkiewicz. Deputy Mayor of the city of Kielce, Agata Wojda. And the Mayor of the city of Białystok, Tadeusz Truskolaski. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe you have noticed that we have not maintained parities, but we follow the direction that is favored right now. So there are more women on our panel. Local governments have become a very serious actor on the political scene throughout Poland. We know that I'm not sure whether the local governments want to be such important political actor, but this has happened. So when there are some problems, the government always approaches local government. So when the national government cannot cope with the pandemic crisis, it requests local governments for their support. The same with the refugee crisis. And now when the government cannot cope with the energy crisis, which is a typical activity, supply of coal for economic and private entities. And the government also asks us for support in this field. So I will start with the mayor of the city of Gdańsk, Aleksandra Dulkiewicz. Are you happy that in so many critical, fundamental issues, you have to do the work instead of the government? First of all, thank you. I have to say that it's the first time I'm taking part in the Freedom Games, so I'm very happy. And during different debates, the gender balance was different. So I hope that nobody is bothered that Tadeusz is in such a great company of three representatives of local governments. I'm sure that each one of us would prefer to deal with our key obligations, which are laid down in the Article 8 of the law on the municipality governments. Nowadays, I often have to answer questions of reporters, residents. Why do you appear in TVN station? Why are you so much interested in the politics? And this is a problem which is rather fake. What is happening in Wiejska, in Ujazdowskie, and of course in Nowogrodzka, this is where things are happening. It impacts the life of residents of Togi, Orunia. So it impacts them and it impacts us because I cannot be focused and deliver the key tasks for the local government. I would prefer to get money to develop all the roads, cycling lanes in Gdańsk, to make sure that schools work as they should be. So spending money on social policy, for example, for the purpose of integration of immigrants, I should be dealing with this. People are often blaming us for discussing for 2 weeks to answer whether I will organize enough coal in Gdańsk, whether I'm going to organize a facility for storing coal for Gdańsk. So I'm sure that all the local governments would prefer to deal with other business. But we are the hosts, and sometimes many inhabitants think that we've got a magic wand and we can do everything we are responsible for, prosecutors, police, courts, so everything which has Gdańsk in its address remains the responsibility of the mayors. And it's not the way it is. So a question to Tadeusz Truskolaski. Well, I'm not going to pretend that I don't know you. That's why I'm going to use first name basis. I don't think it's the bad situation when the government, the national government and the local government cooperate, especially when the times are so uneasy. When we look at the latest energy crisis, we've got the situation where Deputy Prime Minister Sasin states that the local government will be trading in coal. I think that the path should be different. First, you should invite partners to a dialogue. You establish the rules of cooperation, and only then you approach media. You make a press conference and announce the strategy of action. Have you got this feeling? I'm also speaking to you as a representative of 12 biggest Polish cities. Do you feel that the government wants to treat large cities as partners? Well, it would be a funny joke. As a matter of fact, government wants to destroy us. Law and Justice Party, their actions can be foreseen very easily. I am the oldest representative of the local government. It's the 4th term of my office. Each term was different, but when the Law and Justice started ruling Poland, they were focused on destroying regional provincial governments. Out of 15 provincial governments, 16 governments, 15 were led by the opposition parties, apart from the Podkarpacie region. So they were taking away the provincial government's authorities. So we were not that much bothered. Nowadays, the balance is 8-8. They are not destroying provincial governments. They actually support them. The provincial governments receive money. They are quite influential. The latest subsidies, we are not quite sure why several billions of zlotys was allocated. Actually, they have not lost so much money due to change in taxation. So they want to destroy us. So it's not that they are taking our money away from the local governments. We are losing billions of zlotys. Just to use example of Białystok, we lost 519 million Polish from the taxation. 140 millions will be returned. So, and 13.5 billion. So if we look at the allocation, Białystok should receive 105 millions, and we only received 62. So 43 millions were allocated somewhere else. It's a huge amount. Now we are starting to lead a war economy because it will help us to survive, at least in Białystok. We are not a rich city. Our development is based on EU funding and the skills of our people, skills in obtaining such fundings. And we are perceived as enemies. Recently, the budget was allocated differently. I mean, the strategic investment, Gdańsk received 130 million. So congratulations to Gdańsk. But it's only but Stalowa Wola, the mayor Nadbrzeżny is praising the government, so they will receive 200 millions, and the remaining provincial cities will receive nothing. And then the government said, well, we gave you 5 billion zlotys for your investments as the local governments, but actually we are losing, we've lost the funding, and we have to survive. So if we are not successful in the next election to get rid of the Law and Justice Party, then the local government will disappear in Poland. This will be a local government like in Belarus, so it will be only about the money and being subordinate. The governor will be subordinate to the to the president, and then Law and Justice Party will have everything the way they like. Minister Czarnek already proposed commissioners. So it's about surviving this year, and it will either change and the situation will not be good because the local government's public finance has been destroyed. Recently, I was acting as a reviewer on a PhD exam, and I was talking with professors, and 200% GDP is the estimated debt. So we are living for the future generation. We are actually living on the future generation. Białystok, Gdańsk received more money because it's a bigger city, but this is the money for the future, for the next year. So now have lunch here today. Tomorrow there will be no lunch. This is what we were told. There is no lunch tomorrow. So it's like a continuous combat. It's something irrational to me. There is one advantage, because we always have to emphasize pluses. So now we are meeting, we cooperate, we have become one unit. When Civic Union or the Polish People's Party were ruling, we were meeting quite seldom, twice a year. We had coffee, then we left. Only once we were fighting with Minister Rostkowski. But then, we were just meeting very seldom. We were having short conversation. We were praising what we have achieved. And now the situation is different. Let's get back to your question. So the situation has enforced this position on us. As a single government, we mean nothing. Only when we work together, we have the power. And we will use this power as the support to make sure that the democracy wins in the next election.
According to what Mr. Truskolaski said, Law and Justice is like the telephone brand connecting people. It connected and brought together all representatives of local governments. But there is one more perspective, the perspective of inhabitants. There is this approach to the authorities as the unity. The question is, how do citizens respond to what you say, that there won't be any money for extra investments, that the government builds something as that we can call a client-focused approach, and only those who are obedient get the money. Do you see such questions, such responses, and how do you explain it? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me to this important event and for this panel with such distinguished members of local governments. I would like to come back to the first question. The government asks us. They don't ask us. They don't request. They simply impose a post-factum situation. It's like a dream of an insane person. When we entered this room, the chairs were spread apart, and instinctively we put them in a more dense arrangement. It shows that we are united in this battle with the crazy person from Nowogrodzka. My city has quite a small local population. We all know one another, and there are phone calls about when the call will be available, and we also read that the mayor should finally get down to work. Sometimes when I reach the limits of my patience, I say that these should be the guys from the government who should get down to work. Limiting the role of local governments and depriving us of money means that it's very often to share the message. Even if Morawiecki shouts, "You got billions," but nobody tells that says, "I have the budget of 140 million, I get 20 million less for my local community to maintain schools, kindergartens, renovate the roads, and to make good living standards." It's hard to explain to inhabitants that we cannot affect certain things. Giving money for loyalty and stupidity, because when we take a long distance perspective, we easily understand that bowing to people who want to take us away from the very important process, who want to lead us away from democracy. You can see how united we are towards the war in Ukraine. Looking at the future of this state, we understand that it does not pay to be loyal to the ruling party. Even though we, as Białogard, we didn't get any money for supporting people with disabilities. Occupational therapy, adapting the building of a former school to occupational therapy workshop. We got 800,000. And the commune, collaborating with Law and Justice, got 6 million for food manufacture, whatever it means. It's like joyful creation of some members of local authorities. The government or decision makers see the projects which apply to social exclusion, supporting people with disabilities, but on the other hand, they do not support it. And an easy, simple example. We can see many people expressing their hatred. In the local government, we've got liberal power, and Law and Justice would like to get what they lost. There is populism. We have reiterated this word since yesterday. And there is also some fake news on the internet. It's hard to combat it. I can't refer to words on the internet. I use my own resources to ensure renovation of the building for the occupational therapy. I think it's very important for the quality of these people and their families' lives. I have to explain that this building is not in a bad condition, that they can come there. So on the one hand, I have to fight populism and false narrative in such a small local community. It takes a lot of effort to reveal the truth. Once a bad word was said, somebody understood it. Even if I say that Madam Mayor should leave, but I don't go anywhere. Sometimes it's hard to spend or to share the time to participate in such great events. Members of local governments are not plain. They have their own opinions. They know how to use the resources, and taking a long distance perspective, it's important to help and not to disturb. And now the question to Agata Wojda from Kielce. I would like to ask you about the refugee crisis. On the one hand, we can see a very difficult collaboration between the government and local authorities, but on the other hand, we learned that local governments can mobilize local community, most probably because you are so close to your citizens, to local inhabitants. You actually gave a month and a half to organize help. What did it look like from the practical point of view? Could you describe how local government works? Sometimes it's hidden, is disguised when a crisis situation occurs, and that was the refugee situation. According to calculation of Mr. Duszczyk, around 1.5 million refugees remain in Poland. Agata. Actually, the crisis situations vary. We've got pandemic crisis, energy crisis, and refugee crisis, each of them being different. It seems that local administration should supervise the law and perform emergency management. There should be partnership on each level, but there is no such partnership. I will move on to refugee crisis and share more details, but first, referring to what you have just said, when it comes to coal and the current crisis, that's really a mess. It's mid-October. Since July, the Prime Minister has been mentioning coal coming in abundance to Poland. After August and September, it turns out that it's not so plenty of it. In October, we understand that something needs to be done about it, and now they believe that local governments will buy and distribute coal. There are no formal possibilities to do it. First, there needs to be a tender, market research, and so on and so forth. Entering here, I read that Prime Minister Morawiecki said, "Don't worry, we'll impose the law that will operate backwards. So even if you do something against the law today, we will legalize it after some time." It is so absurd in emergency crisis situations where you can accept exceeding the line, crossing the line, if we are convinced that this is the right thing to do. Very often we get things we don't want, but then the regional Court of Auditors, Prosecutor's Office come to us and they remove them in handcuffs for breaking the procedures. So if we are afraid that somebody does not have good intentions, it means we should observe the law. The refugee crisis is different than the one I referred to because it was a bottom-up initiative, grassroots initiative. People wanted to do something to get over their sense of helplessness. In energy crisis, people don't have much to do. They don't go to mines to excavate coal. But since we were devastated by the war, we wanted to do something not to feel helpless. It was possible in the case of helping refugees from Ukraine. We had to channel the grassroots initiative in the right way. The war broke out on Thursday. Then my acquaintances called me and said, we are going to, how should I do it formally? I called the voivodeship office and I said, what does it look like? Where should these people go? And I learned that everybody crosses the reception point at the border. And if they don't, then what? Yeah, there is a special number for those who come from Ukraine and do not get to reception points. I I don't know if 5% of refugees went to reception points because they stopped working. People were driving with their private cars to collect people from Ukraine. We were lucky to have Europe East Integration Association that has been helping Ukrainians and connecting people. So they were the best people to refer to and ask, how can we help you to extend your coverage? The essence was to channel the assistance and to offer the tools to help. On Saturday, on Sunday, we were in their office. We were talking about how to help them, where to store the goods. Two local government MPs organized a collection of goods. And then, first, initially it became spontaneous, then it became systematic, separating the food from clothes, deciding who will deal with logistics. Do you know who was missing? There was no voivodeship office. They started a telephone line after 3 weeks. They opened a point at the bus station. They requested premises. It was open from 7 until 3 p.m. That's really sad. First and foremost, because governmental administration should have adequate books on crisis management. I shouldn't wait for the war to start or shouldn't wait for the flood to happen. I'm really furious and I'm emotional because I experienced the flood in Sandomierz in 2010. I experienced it, and I know the crisis was different. The voivode, deputy voivode, do not handle the reality. They didn't go to those who were at the forefront of this battle. So, if you don't know the mechanisms, you are not able to help. There are also issues related to personal identity numbers. It does not occur on any laptop computer, but on special authorized equipment. If I were to define it, the refugee crisis means engagement, solidarity, and help of citizens. It was our role to channel it and to systematize it. We were distributing goods on Saturdays and Sundays. There was something we could call the Republic of Citizens or Civic Republic. The refugee crisis connected us towards common activity, especially after the post-pandemic crisis, when we wanted to show that we can change the reality for good. So now just briefly, because I would like to give the floor to the audience. After the first wave of enthusiasm, what does the current situation related to help for Ukraine look like? We can now observe that some politicians with xenophobic approach want to take advantage of this crisis to stimulate anti-refugee emotions. Listening to what Madame Mayer was saying, I thought that we should mention it first thing. Apart from grassroots initiatives, apart from their great engagement during the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, we also need to say what is happening now. That's a normal situation, that the wave of empathy and the sense of or the zeal to help, we become exhausted. Our emotions become exhausted. We have to deal with everyday mundane problems, and there are some bad feelings which occur. We can notice that, and we need a general idea how to cope with that. We can hear that they don't want to go to work, they get everything for free. Beauticians as well, probably. I once read a Facebook post that they come to us because they want to get free makeup. Right, they escape from their own country to have makeup or manicure done. What does it show? The person did not understand my comment, but it shows something very dangerous. Everybody sitting here understands that we wouldn't like to be in a similar situation. But there is such a hazard. For instance, Ukrainian or refugee children were the first ones to be accepted in kindergartens. But this is something like this exists for Ukraine. And it is conditioned by the lack of response of those in Ukraine. This is something that can be used by nationalists or neo-fascist organizations. That's a very dangerous phenomenon. Poland has a lot to do in this respect. It can gain something as the Polish society by overcoming the crisis. We should draw conclusions, but the history teaches us that we should draw conclusions, but it does not happen. We have to tell that the government knew there would be war in Ukraine, but they didn't prepare for it. Nobody implemented any measures when the refugees were crossing the border. These were the members of local governments who cope with the situations. The stronger the local authority, the stronger the state.
Tadeusz, a question for you. The last three crises, pandemic, refugee, and energy crisis, show that the more local governments are important in the states, the response to crisis is better. They are better to engage the civic society. So, due to your functions, you have contacts with the central government. So, could you explain to us in a simple way why the local government country works? Why does the government wants to get rid of the local government? Because the first three letters, law and justice, they hate everything that includes an element of independence, and the self-government, local government is self-governing itself, and they say it's not possible. They do not accept the situation. The leader, he's a little bit older than me, but I remember exactly that communist times, and it's a copy. He's like a copycat of the situation in the 1970s. They always call everything national. Our council should be called national, and then it will be done and over. So this is an ideological problem. The government view the functioning of the state in a completely different way. They want to have the centralized state, and such states do not cope. Now they have the strong local government, so they just impose the duties on the local governments, and then they boast. When the refugee crisis started, they were claiming that the reception points and the assistance to the Ukraine was to be the responsibility of the central government, and they didn't cope. A month took before a truck from the government started its journey to Ukraine, and we started working spontaneously, and very quickly we launched the charity points where Ukrainian refugees could get some help. We were working every day, 24 hours a day. We were not working just between 7 and 3 p.m., 7 a.m. and 3 p.m., because we know the needs, we feel them, we are very close to people. And now the central government has ideology. On the other hand, they've got us, and this coal-related maneuver was really terrible, because they were saying, you lazy bones, you have to start working. Why don't you want to help your inhabitants? And if some of us did it, then the commissioner would be probably introduced. Sooner or later, we would have a commissioner. Do you remember the envelope election? They were blaming us that we blocked the election. And this is the problem. Different approach to the state. This is the problem. We have some slogans: strong local government, strong Poland. But central government does not understand it. The only way is to make sure that they are out of the authorities, that Poland again goes back to the European family. Polexit is a matter of time. The next term of their office, remember the strike of teachers strike. Now we could read in Minister Dworczyk's emails, they were full of hatred. So they believe in propaganda, and the propaganda is efficient to a certain extent, but you cannot use it to produce energy at home. So all we have to do, we just have to keep working. There are some local governments, such as Otwock, and the mayor of Otwock, who is shown as the example to follow. So we heard this news that 64 families were supported. So is this a way to make some arguments between the local governments? Yes, but the money-based method is more efficient. Local governments lost some 200,000, 300,000 from the taxation, and the minimum amount they are receiving now is 2,800,000. So they are happy. I was talking to a head of the village, and he said, if they are taking away from you and giving the funding to me, I am happy. Of course, this is the mayor that supports the central government. He is not a member of the Law and Justice Party, but in this municipality, support for Law and Justice Party is huge. They don't care what is happening in Gdańsk or Białystok. They are happy because they receive the money. So we have these differences. The rural associations are not very outspoken about it because they receive the money. They don't care that this is the money that has been borrowed, that there is inflation. They are just happy because they receive the money. So they also use haters, trolls, or some residents who simply got cheated. There were not that many people. There was a protest of local governments in Warsaw. I think it was quite successful. I took part in it. And then on Sunday, I received the so-called 50s. So I was awarding medals to couples who were together for 50 years. And actually, 6 of the couples congratulated me on taking part in this protest. Also, it's interesting what is happening during meetings of Donald Tusk. Actually, these are real participants. Nobody brings them in coaches to speak with Tusk. When there was complementary election in 2015, the Law and Justice Party were winning, and now actually they are losing if there are some additional complementary elections. So it shows that the majority is against the centralization. Mrs. Mayor. Madam Mayor, I wanted to ask you, sometimes you have to work under the pressure that there is no regulations. For example, during the coal crisis, they are saying that they are going to establish new regulations. So I would like to refer to the example of pollution to the Oder. So in fact, Oder River, the marshals, Madam Marshal Polak, she was under the pressure, she was threatened and blackmailed, so on and so forth. So how can you work efficiently and also in accordance with the law? It concerns the odor pollution, it's also important for the energy crisis. So how can you work if the ministers, deputy ministers are threatening you and they say that if you do something this way, you will have prosecutors to deal with? Agata mentioned it. I think that we will leave this meeting feeling that we can only complain and nothing positive happens. We still got a quarter of an hour. What should I say? Minister Czarnek often threatened me that he will start a case in prosecutor's office. Then the national television, all the public media were talking about it. We always focus on TVP info channel, but there are different websites, publications supported by the law and justice and use the propaganda message. And so far, I haven't received any letter from the prosecutors. So it's just propaganda. Very often in our metropolitan area, I speak to the heads of villages, districts, local governments from smaller villages. It's easy for me to say something more provocative. Of course, we will see the result of the local government's election. Now we don't know when the election should take place. It should occur next autumn because it will show. I'm not sure whether many residents of Gdańsk are happy that they have to stay on barricades because they elected me for different purpose, and this is our dilemma we have to face on daily basis. Being with people in the street every day, even in a difficult situation, but also the open expression of our inability of achieving something. To be honest, in my fatherland, in Poland, in Europe. Actually, this weekend I took part in training delivered by Americans. So Poland is still considered to be the tiger of Europe, the leader of changes. We are seen as the country that has used the opportunities after the collapse of communism. And the things we have done for Ukraine is our huge capital. And now, do you know anyone in Poland who is in authority, whether they can be the true leaders? Have they ever stood in front of us and say, it's difficult, we don't know how to do it, help us, or let's do this way or that way, or let's consider together? Have they ever approached us to be a community? Once, when I went to a meeting to Prime Minister Szydło, that she said that we should be united under white and red flag, and this is the real problem we have to face and cope with. The residents from Kielce, Białystok, Białogard or Gdańsk, all these residents want to have leaders who will also say about difficult things, but the leaders will be able to resolve them, and the residents prefer to have street lighting. They want to have nice roads and nice toilets at schools, so it's like balancing. There is another difficult thing, education. We cannot explain. I don't even expect that the average Gdańsk resident will understand the role of the city council, regional parliament, or other offices. People do not understand where taxes are from, and if they do not understand what checks are. Because somebody told me that yesterday I received 100 million zlotys to develop the road system to support Gdańsk airport. we have 2%, the city has 2% in the state treasury company. We have to develop the port because the cargo has to be transported. Gdańsk port is one of the suppliers to the state budgets, excise, duty, taxes. It's all for the central budget. So I'm very happy that something that will cost 350 million zlotys, we have received 100 million zlotys to develop Gdańsk port. We are missing good economic education. I have a very good assistant. He's not here with me today because he is still studying, but next year he will be 26 years old and he starts discussing his salary with me. Young people, till they are 26, they do not have to pay the corporate income tax. So the gross payment is the net payment. And they are quite open. If they are going to receive a certain amount of money, once they are over 26, the gross amount will be completely different. People do not understand that we are not taught such subjects at school. People do not understand what the personal income tax is. And he's a graduate of my secondary. Actually, Jacek Kurski has graduated from the same school as me, and actually he says that the stupid people, the dark people, will buy it. So, of course, we have to disseminate knowledge, education. This was done by Mayor Paweł Adamowicz. He has always remembered this, and it's very important. We mustn't assume that people know everything, and we have to remember that they are vulnerable to propaganda. So we have to keep explaining, educating them. This is our role. I don't know whether we win or not. But education to me is the only way. Education is important. Just answering the question on social anxiety in terms of the national aspects. Do you know when the migration policy draft has been presented? When people in the forests next to the Belarusian border were dying. So this was the first time when the representative of the local government presented this policy. We are one of the biggest member states and we have no such policies. In 2017 in Gdańsk, actually, Mayor Adamowicz was really very keen on having the policy for immigrants. It wasn't the officials who were working on this policy on their own. They were contacting NGOs, activists from different European states who had to tackle integration. So we were accused that Gdańsk wants to be involved in the foreign policy. Nowadays, we've got a standard, a model that maybe is insufficient. Maybe we should have more instruments and better ones. But it has been very helpful during the refugee crisis. And this is very important, but this is the tool that was initiated by the local government. So my wish is that in our very small fatherland, we have leaders who will really assume responsibility for these aspects. As Emilia said, the social change, the refugee integration, diversity, they are the assets. You know that I'm in love with Gdańsk. You know why it looks the way it looks, because it was built by several nations, by people who believed in different things. They came to Gdańsk from the Netherlands, Germany, they were Jews, so on and so forth. That is why the city looks the way it does, and it's becoming more and more beautiful because it keeps being open. Agata, very briefly, because I would still like to ask the audience to intervene. Do you feel that this solidarity, empathy capital started also thanks to the local governments during the refugee crisis, and whether we still have some of this capital left? We'll see also whether the energy crisis will lead us to hatred, when people will hate one another, and there will be the belief that only the ones who have more supporters will win, who have friends. I will just repeat what Madam Mayor has been saying. This enthusiasm is diminishing now. First, we were offering free public transport, and initially people were all for it. But in May, when we extended this for 2 months, half of them stopped being pleased. Why it's for Ukrainians? Why it's not for Poles? Now these proportions are even more negative. It's due to many aspects. People have their problems. They have less capacity, the money is smaller. The Russian trolls are also very active. Observers or analysts showed how anti-vaccine accounts were transferred into accounts that were dealing with other areas. But we haven't lost this capital, because some organizational groups have been developed. People have met one another. They were meeting through Messenger, Facebook. There are still groups that share information via these media. We also have the social assistance point for Ukrainians, and people from abroad were sending their money. They were sending the gifts to our point. So this has remained, and it's a value. But I would like to stress one thing. Paradoxically, we were lucky that the law and justice, this government has not been against Ukrainians, that they didn't turn Ukrainians into a new enemy. If we had refugees from the Belarus-Poland border, and if we were to help in this way, the cities would have to face hell. So many antagonizing efforts would have been made. Now the Law and Justice Party members actually did not disseminate hatred very often. They were placing Ukrainian flag on their Facebook accounts. I don't know Law and Justice people in Gdańsk who would be bringing the gifts, but maybe they were, but at least they were not disturbing us. So the situation would be very different if the central government's narration would not be so open towards Ukrainians. It was very difficult, of course. This wave of solidarity and empathy among Poles was huge towards people who were running away from evil, from death.
But it's not so obvious when Mr. Kaczyński says it's going to be parasites spreading all over our country. Please note how difficult the situation of refugee centers is. It's not only about Ukrainian refugees, but those representing different religions. Who of you, ladies and gentlemen, would like to ask a question? Our volunteers are there, and we need a microphone. Okay, so I will ask the first question, and then I will give the floor to you. I don't want to waste time for delivering the microphone. Joanna Ciesielska, we have had so many interesting things. I would like to refer to the war in Ukraine and refugee crisis. I would like to ask you about the experience from other countries, because there was a strong refugee crisis in Europe. Is there a community of projects, of ideas? Do you use the knowledge of mayors from other European cities? And if you could deliver the microphone to the lady on the right, please. I will just briefly answer. I'm going to give the answer to this question. We'll remember that. Together with Tadeusz, we are members of the European Committee of Regions, which brings together local and regional authorities from all over Europe. Since last year, I have been the head of the Ukraine Committee of Regions. I have to say that our colleagues from Greece, Italy, we have to remember high numbers of refugees arriving in Greece or Italy. It's around 500,000. When we take Poland, Czechia, and Romania into account, there were 8 million people entering, but 5 million left European Union. Around 3 million stayed, majority of whom in Poland. So on the one hand, our colleagues say, you know, how Poland behaved back then. We all know what was the approach towards refugees, but they also teach us solidarity. The mayor of Palermo said, "How can I help you?" I can clearly say that from Rotterdam, Leipzig, Brems, we also received the financial support, not to mention material support. And the question. I've got a short comment. Mr. Truskolaski said that they don't understand self-governments. I'm afraid of such rhetorics because they know what local governance, what European Union, what democracy is. They understand that this is something they should destroy. They are on the trajectory towards dictatorship. If they don't understand, well, explain it to them, they will understand, and hand in hand, and then they will say, yes, understood. That's the strategic objective, to take us from the European Union using all the methods, destroy democracy, destroy local governance. They follow such a narrow logical corridor from which they cannot come back. It's not possible to withdraw. It's like low, narrow bridges in the Himalayas. We can hope that they will fall into the abyss. It's important, it's a matter of our logics. If we are not on the right trajectory following our logics, they can reach their strategic objective. You expressed it much stronger than I did. I wanted to be more gentle, but I fully agree with you. Agata, you wanted to refer to it. I'm afraid you are right, because unaware operation is much better than intended one. We need to finish because time matters from the point of view of successive panels. Well, local government is not a perfect creation, but nothing better has ever been created to bring authorities closer to people, and so that the citizens have the right to co-rule. Local governments during the last 3 crises know how to deal with that. Ladies and gentlemen, can you imagine different Poland than the democratic one? I think we don't. There is no other Poland possible. The fact that we are here, the fact that there are around 400 panels, it shows how many people are involved in such activities. I'm full of hope for younger generations that Poland will be democratic and European, that nobody is going to deprive us from that. And I believe that truth will win and the dictatorship will fall down. Agata Wojda, Kielce, Emilia Bury, Białogard, Tadeusz Truskolaski, Białystok, and Aleksandra Dulkiewicz, Gdańsk. Thank you.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise.
Atlas Network is, as the name suggests, a network, and it's global. We work all around the world. We're based in the U.S. We have about 159 partners in the United States right now, and the bulk of our partners are outside, nearly 500 in total.
Atlas Network, it connects people from all over the world defending the idea of human dignity, defending human rights and personal liberties.
Atlas Network is focusing on, I think, the most important and moral cause in the entire world.
We partner with local innovators, local leaders who understand conditions on the ground in communities facing real challenges. We look at the people from the worldwide freedom movement that are passionate, are ready to make a difference, understand local conditions, and we invest in them.
At Atlas Network, we unleash individual ingenuity to enrich humanity.
The United States does not have a lock on the idea of freedom and liberty. Those ideas are beyond borders.
One of the main goals of Atlas Network is to eradicate poverty around the world, and we do that by investing millions of dollars in our partners' work every year.
Historically, wealthy nations around the world have tried to help low-income countries develop. The way we've been doing it traditionally has not really been working. So there's a movement to do development differently, and that means we need to step back as outsiders and rethink the role that we're playing in helping people in low-income countries achieve their dreams.
We want to make the world a better place. We want to make the world a freer world.
All of us want to leave a legacy and be part of something big to make a better world. This is exactly the work of Atlas Network.
With our growing number of hundreds of successful partners, we're stronger than ever.
Changing the world
Changing the world
Changing the world
starts together with us.